Malinali took out a coarse cotton sack that she had tied under her blanket skirt, in which were held the grains of corn that had been used to read her fate. It was a living memory that she would always keep with her. She had threaded the grains together with a cotton string to secure her fate. Each morning she would finger them one by one as she prayed, and this day was no exception. With great zeal she asked her dear grandmother to protect her, to watch over her, but more than anything she asked her to rid her of fear, to let her see with new eyes what was to come. She shut her eyes and tightly squeezed on the grains of corn before continuing her task. Drops of sweat dripped from her face, partly from the labor of working the grinding stone, but also from the great humidity that was palpable even at this early hour. The humidity didn't bother her at all. On the contrary, it reminded her of the God of water who was ever present in the air. She liked to feel it, touch it. But on this morning, the wet air bothered her. It seemed to be charged with an unbearable fear, a dread that hid under rocks, under clothes, underneath the skin. It was a dread that emanated from Montezuma's palace, which loomed like a shadow from the valley of Anahuac to the place where she was. It was a liquid fear that penetrated the skin, the bones, the heart, a fear caused by several terrible omens that had come to pass one after the other, years before the Spaniards had reached these lands. They all foretold the fall of the empire. The first omen was a burning ear of corn that appeared one night and that seemed to drip fire onto the earth. The second omen was the conflagration that destroyed the temple of Huitzilopochtli, god of war, for which no cause was ever discovered, no one having started the fire, and which no one was able to extinguish. The third omen was a deadly ray that struck a thatched roof of the great temple of Tenochtitlan, a solar strike that came from nowhere, for it had been drizzling. The fourth omen was the appearance in the sky of a mantle of sparks that 3 by 3 created a giant tunic which traversed the sky with its long train, originating from the spot where the sun rises and heading toward where it falls. When the townspeople saw it, they shrieked in horror. The fifth omen was the boiling waters in one of the lakes near the valley of Anahuac. The waters rose and boiled with such fury that they demolished all the nearby houses. The sixth omen was the appearance of Cihuacotl, the goddess whose wails could be heard at night. "My children, where shall I take you? We must flee far from here." The seventh omen was the appearance of an unfamiliar bird that some fishermen found and took to Montezuma. It was an ash-colored bird, like the crane, that had a mirror in its head. Looking through it, you could see the heavens and the stars. When Montezuma looked for a second time into the mirror on the bird's head, he saw many men fighting among themselves, and interpreted this as a dreadful prophecy. The eighth and final omen was the appearance of misshapen creatures who possessed 2 heads, or who were joined at the front or the back, and who would disappear as soon as Montezuma noticed them. Shaken, Montezuma called forth his sages and soothsayers. "I want you to tell me what is to come, be it sickness, plagues, hunger, locust, earthquakes, be it rains or no rains. Tell me. I want to know whether wars will be waged on us or whether deaths may result from the apparitions of mirror-headed birds. Don't keep it from me. I also want to know if you have heard the renowned Cihuacóatl crying, for when anything is about to happen in this world, she knows about it first, long before it comes to pass. In the silence of dawn, Malinali could swear that she heard the lament, the weeping of Cihuacóatl, and she felt an urgent need to urinate. She stood from her work at the grinding stone and went out to the patio. She lifted her blanket skirt and huipil, squatted and strained, but the liquid refused to leave her body. Malinali then realized that the sensation in her belly came from fear and not from a physiological need. She missed her grandmother more than ever and remembered the day that they had given her away for the first time. She was only a child of 5. The thought of abandoning all that she treasured terrified her. She trembled from head to toe when they told her that she could take only what was absolutely necessary. She didn't have to give it more than a moment's thought and grabbed a burlap sack, filling it with what her grandmother had left her: a jade necklace and bracelet, a turquoise necklace, some huipiles that her grandmother had embroidered for her, ceramic figures that they had made together, and some grains of corn from the fields that they had both harvested. Her mother took her to the outskirts of town. Malinali, with her things on her back, clung to her mother's hand as if she wanted to become one with it, as if she, a mere girl, were the very Quetzalcoatl, struggling to fuse himself with the sun to govern the world. But she wasn't a goddess, and her wish was in vain. Her mother let go of her tiny grasping fingers, gave her away to her new masters, and turned away. Malinali, upon seeing her go, peed on herself and felt at the moment as if the gods were abandoning her, that they wouldn't be coming with her, that the liquid that ran down her legs was the sign that the god of the waters had forsaken her. She wept the entire way, spilling her tears over the trails she crossed as if she were marking the path by which, years later, she would return, then in the company of Cortés. The sorrow of that fateful day was greatly diminished when the following dawn, tired of weeping, she looked up at the sky and saw the morning star. Her heart leaped in her chest. She greeted her eternal friend and said a blessing. At that moment, in spite of her age, or perhaps because of it, Malinali saw clearly that she had lost nothing, that there was no reason to fear, that the gods were everywhere, not just at her home. Here, too, where she was, a breeze blew. There were flowers, there was song, the moon and the morning star were present, and at dawn, the sun also rose. With the passing days, she confirmed as well that her grandmother had not died. She lived in her thoughts, lived in the cornfields where Malinali had planted the grains that she brought in her sack. Together, she and her grandmother had chosen the finest grains from the last harvest to be planted before the following rainy season. And although Malinali could no longer do the sowing with her grandmother's blessing or on her own beloved terrain, it had been a success. The cornfield brimmed with giant ears that were impregnated with the essence of her grandmother. And after the harvest, Malinali could achieve a kind of communion with her every time she brought a tortilla to her mouth. Her grandmother had been her best playmate, her greatest ally, her best friend in spite of the fact that little by little the years had left her blind. The funny thing was that the less her grandmother was able to see, the less she needed her eyes. She told no one about losing her sight. She got around the same as ever, and she knew exactly where everything was. She never stumbled over anything or asked for help. It seemed as if she had sketched out in her mind all the distances, paths, and corners of her surroundings. When Malinali turned 3, her grandmother gave her clay figurines and toys, a dress she had embroidered when already almost blind, a turquoise necklace, and a small bracelet made of grains of corn. Malinali felt truly loved. She went out to the patio with her grandmother to play with her new toys. Soon afterward, a dark cloud covered them and loud thunder interrupted their games. A bolt of lightning caught Malinali's attention. It was silver in the sky. What did it mean? What was that silvery splendor on the gray? Before her grandmother could answer her, it began to hail. The noise was such that no voice could be heard, only the sound that deafened everything. Malinali and her grandmother took shelter from the storm inside the house. When the rain stopped, Malinali asked for permission to go outside and play. Happy and excited, she buried her hands in the ice stones. She erected figures and made circles of ice till little by little they melted into water. She played for 2 hours in the mud and water. She soiled her new dress, her knees, and her hands. She made clay dolls and mud balls, and finally she grew tired. When night was already falling, she went back inside the house and said to her grandmother, "Of all the toys that I have been given, I like the toys of water the best." "Why?" the grandmother asked. "Because they change shapes." "Yes, child," the grandmother explained. "They are your prettiest toys, not only because they change shapes, but because they always return, for water is eternal." The girl felt as if she had been understood, and she kissed her grandmother. On receiving the kiss, the grandmother noticed that the child smelled like wet earth and that she was covered in mud from head to toe. It didn't bother the grandmother that Malinali had soiled her dress or that the child had ruined so quickly what her blind eyes had made with such great effort. On the contrary, she talked to her about the joys of finding pleasure in the water, the earth, and the wind. How giving oneself over to them was a way to relish life. After the showers, the heat again took hold, and gradually it became intolerable. Although it was already night, Malinali asked for permission to go out and play again, and her grandmother, since it was the girl's birthday, let her. The old woman sat by the doorway while her granddaughter laughed and played outside. After a while, a silence arose. Not another sound was heard. The grandmother grew frightened and went out to look for her granddaughter, whom she loved more than her own flesh, than sight itself, than the stars. As she walked, she stumbled upon her and realized that the girl had fallen asleep in the mud. She caressed her with great tenderness, picked her up, and carried her into the house. She placed her in her own bed to sleep and remained beside her, watching the stars. She could not see them with her physical eyes, but with those of her spirit, eyes with which he had long ago mapped out a planetarium in her heart.